Welcome to the Jewellers Academy podcast. My name is Jessica Rose, a serial jewellery business owner, and I founded the multi-award-winning London Jewellery School and Jewellers Academy. Having helped over 1 million people learn jewellery making, I passionately believe that anyone can have a successful business making and selling things they love. Each week you'll hear tips, support and practical advice on how to launch and grow your jewellery or handmade business, as well as inspiring interviews. If, like me, you believe that handmade is best, then you're in the right place. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. Now let's jump into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to today's podcast when I'm joined by our wonderful guest, Emma René, and we're going to be talking about 10 common mistakes that jewelers or handmade artists make with their branding, and more importantly, how we can overcome them and how we can work on those common mistakes so that we are really doing the best for our brand and making sure that we get our work out there and seen in the right way, attracting our ideal customers. So before I share a little bit more about Emma, I also wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's supported the podcast so far. We are still quite a new podcast, so really appreciate it. And I wanted to share one of the reviews with you, and I'm going to try and do this every couple of weeks just to give a shout out to a reviewer. And if you haven't reviewed the podcast, it means so much to us if you're able to. It only takes a few seconds, and you can do it on the Apple app or wherever you are listening to the podcast from. So this one is from Joe R. the Jeweler, and it says, packed with amazing information, 5 stars. I've just listened to the first podcast, and despite having done numerous Instagram courses, I still picked up so many useful tips. It was fantastic. Can't wait to hear the next one. So these just warm my heart. So thank you so much for that, Joe. And there's lots more. So I'm going to be giving a shout out as much as I can to each person who leaves us a review. And as I said, if you haven't yet, really would appreciate it. It means a lot to getting this podcast seen and heard by other jewelers and handmade artists so we can help as many people as possible. So for today, we're joined by Emma, and me and Emma have worked very closely together for the past few years. She is an award-winning art director who's had a long career in advertising. She took some time out to raise a family, and now she works part-time as the digital marketing coordinator for Jewellers Academy. And she also runs her own jewellery label, Narratorium, which you can find on Instagram. So she has a wealth of experience in graphic design, branding, advertising and marketing, as well as the experience of running her own handmade business. So she understands what we're going through when it comes to branding. And we talk about, the common mistakes, which I've definitely made, a lot of us make. And you may, as you go through, just recognize the ones that you feel like, that's one I need to work on. And I will just give you a warning. There's a lot in this episode, so it's not about doing it all right now, but perhaps just picking out the one that you want to work on next as something to improve, because branding can make the difference between selling your work and not selling it. And, it's not all to do with how lovely the jewelry is. That's, of course, important, but we want to make sure we get this right so that you are getting all the sales that you should be getting and getting the growth that you deserve. So let's get started and into today's episode, and I will welcome Emma onto the podcast. Okay, so big welcome, Emma, to the Jewellers Academy podcast. Thank you so much for coming and joining me on the show today.
Hi, Jess. Yes, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. I'm excited that we have you on because those of you that don't know Emma works with us here at Jewellers Academy, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her experience, but she helps us a lot with our visual branding and how we communicate our brand and how we keep it consistent. And this is something that I know I really struggled with when I was starting my business. I kind of knew what a good brand looked like, but I couldn't quite make it happen for myself. And I always felt like it was letting down what I was trying to communicate to my customers. So today, together, we're going to talk through the 10 mistakes that handmade designers often make with their branding and how we can fix them or rectify them. So Emma, do you want to start by just introducing yourself and letting everyone know who you are and what your background is, why we're talking about this today?
Hi, yeah, sure. So, yeah, for the majority of the last 15 years, I've worked in advertising as an art director alongside a copywriter. And we worked for lots of different agencies in that time, coming up with creative work on various campaigns for all kinds of brands, from TV ads to email campaigns. And in that time, I've also set up my own jewellery business, the Narratorium, in I think it was 2015, which is basically my little creative baby. And I've also had a couple of babies in the meantime, which kept me busy. And so now I work part-time for Jewellers Academy as a digital marketing coordinator. And I guess I have a wealth of experience in branding, advertising, and marketing, essentially. So it's an honour to be invited to talk on this podcast today to try and help other jewellers and handmade artists find their way with their branding, because it's not an easy job at all. And obviously, people pay companies, professional companies, and people like me to do their branding and advertising. So yeah, it's not an easy one. We're not all good at this. So. But yeah, hopefully I can offer some help and advice to kind of make people better at it.
Definitely. And I think that's a really important point, is that often we just put this pressure on ourselves, like we started this business, we must be able to do good branding, this must just be natural to us. But, people go to university for years to learn this. They learn how to do graphic design, and we're just kind of thrown in, and it's like, good luck. I hope it looks good.
Yeah.
So it's, I think there's real kind of value in taking time out of your business to learn about this and to educate yourself. And even when you use a brand designer, you still need to incorporate all of those elements into your design. And we use Canva a lot, don't we, for kind of graphic design, which is if anyone's not heard of it, it's kind of a graphic design for non-graphic designers program. But something that I really learned once we had a professional do our branding is actually using the branding well and implementing it is a whole nother skill set to learn as well. So lots and lots of things. So let's get started with kind of going through these 10 mistakes that we kind of discussed before. So what is the first mistake that a lot of us handmade designers make when it comes to our branding?
Well, I often see handmade artists and jewellers creating a logo that's just really too fussy or elaborate. So you'll see logos with really swirly fonts or like too many elements, and something that's just basically like, too busy. There's just too much going on. And I think you have to remember that some of the most iconic logos, some of the best you can think of, are the most simple. So there's absolutely no reason to make your logo kind of say everything. You don't have to say everything in the logo. You've got a lot of other things going on in your branding that will help you communicate what you're about. So don't ever feel like you have to put it all into the logo. I mean, I think one of the best examples I can give is Coca-Cola, for example, is just a simple font choice, and it's famous worldwide. Everyone knows Coca-Cola, so it's, easy recognizable because of that. So just remember, I think that, with logos, just keep things simple. There's definitely an art to it, no doubt about it, but simplicity is key, really. And I'd say, font choice is probably one of the most important things. So firstly, make sure it's legible, and then make sure it reflects your personality. So, handwritten and calligraphy fonts are always more feminine. So if your jewellery's pretty and delicate, then, a font like that is probably going to be the best one. If your jewellery's more contemporary or modern, then choose like a sans serif, something that's clean and uncomplicated, for example. And then, of course, people love a clever logo. I love a clever logo. Something where there's a clever visual that represents, what your brand does or what your brand is. But again, it has to be incredibly simple. So always, try and strip things back as much as possible and look to kind of, build your brand in all the other ways that we'll talk about, and that you may know about already. Just keep that logo uber simple.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, isn't it? And this is something, it took me a long time to learn this, because I used to feel like my logo needed to show my jewelry in it and also have my colours in it and also have, the name in it. But once you've got all of those things, that's already quite a lot. And something that I've learned over working with brand designers over the years is that actually you can have the colours elsewhere, you can have the pictures elsewhere. and even just a very simple logo will help the other things to really be amplified.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's really interesting.
Just keep it simple. And I think you've also got to remember to design a logo that, you know, can be flexible to some extent as well. You know, it's got to work in lots of different places. So that's one of the most important things. I mean, to give an example, for example, is my logo Narratorium is quite long because I chose a scripted font for it because it was about stories. And you know, I have a shorthand version of that for all my social channels where I just use the N. So when you see the brand together and you see it in different places, it's still easily recognizable. It works in different ways. So I think it's better to think of it like that. Think of just simple things you can do to kind of work in different places with your logo.
So like pulling out a little element of it, you don't have to use the full extent of the logo every time. And we kind of have that a bit with the Jewellers Academy logo where we use just the star in quite a lot of places, just to kind of little mark, but not the whole thing.
That's the thing. So yeah, it's sometimes helpful to have, like you say, either have a mark or you take the first letter, or you know, some way of kind of simplifying that logo, because there's lots of places where you can't have a really elaborate logo working there.
Yeah, it makes me think as well of packaging and getting boxes printed or sometimes bags printed and things like that. And I remember also with some of my jewelry businesses, one of them did have a very elaborate logo, and the printers actually said to me, we can't print this in quite the way you want it because some of the lines are very fine. So sometimes that's really worth thinking about as well if you've got some packaging in mind.
Even signage actually. There's one thing I've struggled a little with Narratorium is to get a sign that I like the look of.
Is this a sign for like craft fairs?
Yeah, for craft fairs or trade shows. You know, because the font is so fine and thin, you know, it's kind of limits me to certain options then that I maybe didn't want. So it's really good to consider where your logo is going to go. You know, the fact that it is going to go on packaging, you might need signing, and how it will need to flex, especially if you've got something in mind that you want to do, a style of sign, for example, that you want to do.
Interesting. Yeah, all things to consider. And I think something that I recognize as well is that generally the more stripped back the logo is, what it says to me is more high end. So I noticed that a lot of logos for businesses that are selling things that are a lot more affordable, kind of that end of the market, tend to have a lot more colours in, maybe a lot more elements to them. And then particularly with jewellery or handmade work, as it gets more luxury, everything seems to be a lot more minimalistic in terms of logo. Because I think you really want to draw the eye to the pieces and say, like, this is what you're buying.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, really. I suppose it's a level of sophistication, you know, that you have with a kind of the slightly more high-end luxurious brands. You know, it is just, you know, they're incredibly simple and elegant and often just a font. I mean, I think probably Tiffany and Co, for example, theirs is just a font, again, easily recognisable. So yeah, it's interesting. I think, let's say, don't worry about cramming too much into your logo. I think is just pick a nice font and maybe just one simple element you want to add to it. You know, whether that's a flower or a shape of some sort. But just keep it simple. It's definitely more premium, I think.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, brilliant. That's number one, a logo that is too elaborate. So that's definitely actionable as we can strip back our logos. And if you do have a logo that is too elaborate, it might be as simple as just taking some bits out and still keeping the font. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it doesn't mean you have to necessarily redesign everything.
No.
Could just be stripping it back. So what is the second mistake that we often make with our branding?
So another big mistake I see, and it's no surprise because this is not easy stuff, but is a lack of consistency throughout the brand. You know, this is where so many brands fall down. Consistency and cohesiveness is absolutely key to a successful brand. It has to run through everything you do. But often, you know, I'll see brand names that just don't match up with what I'm seeing. You know, the logo, the colorways, sometimes even the jewelry, everything's a mismatch. You know, you might see something. I've seen sort of names that sort of suggest something really pretty and delicate, and maybe the jewelry is too, but the design of it is heavy or clunky or masculine. So you just got to, really try to make sure, everything, all your elements are marrying up, and then that you carry them through, everything you're doing ongoing. So, I mean, it's a difficult one. It's really difficult. But, there are things that you can do. I think if you're feeling in a bit of a muddle, one of the best things you can do is maybe go back to the drawing board and revisit your core values. Define your personality and style in a handful of keywords that are descriptive, and then start again by translating them into a visual language. I think Pinterest is brilliant for mood boarding. So use it. Use Pinterest to create a mood board of your style, your brand style. And it's because it's a great way of just seeing what's working together, and be really critical as well, and weed out things that just don't fit. Be strict with yourself. Don't keep everything in there just because you like it. Just start weeding out, going, no, that's not right. It doesn't feel the same as the rest of the things on the page. So yeah, I think Pinterest is a great tool for this, to build your brand's mood essentially. And then essentially you've got to set rules and try and stick with them. Limit yourself to colorways and an image style, things like that. Really, consistency is key. And I think as an art director as well, image consistency is really important to me. And as a brand and selling products such as jewellery or handmade items, photography is everything. So having great images of your jewellery or work should be one of the most important things. So I think this is where I feel like you should really always focus your efforts on really getting that to a high standard.
Yeah, definitely. And I love it when I see designers' work on Instagram or somewhere online, and I just instantly know whose it is before I even look at their profile, or just from their image style. There's a consistency there already. And I think if we look at any brands that we admire, whether they're big or small, if they're really working on their branding, you can see that straight away. As you're like, oh, that's like Karen Young, who's been on the podcast as well, is a great example of this. That's a Karen Young photograph with a Karen Young piece of jewellery, or, and you can see that for a lot of the big names. So how do we get that? Is it, you said doing Pinterest, which is great. And then is it just kind of practicing, and do you sometimes put out stuff and think that it's going to work, and then look back and think, actually, that wasn't quite in fitting?
Yeah, I think it's always very easy to do, and because I think you're gonna need lots of different images of your work essentially. But it's maybe a good idea to sort of kind of, again, just setting some boundaries in what you're using. Say with propping, when I started out with Narratorium, I kind of limited myself to making paper sets. So because of the stories, the nature of my jewellery, everything was, had a story to it. I kind of it all linked back to sort of stories narrative being on paper. So I set myself a little rule of making paper sets. I've started to introduce a few more things now, but I still sort of using crumpled tissue paper or little paper props occasionally in the things that I'm doing. So, it's maybe just setting yourself a few rules, things that feel relevant, again, to what you're doing, to the imagery that you're creating in your product. And then other things are kind of, in terms of sort of in advertising, when we're creating video or photography, we often talk about something known as grading or colour correction. So, when producing a campaign, once all the footage and shots have been taken, they'll be graded so that they're consistent in look and feel. So it's another thing you maybe want to, another sort of layer you want to think of, is sort of having the same sort of colour correction on everything, or like style or tone, I guess. And there's Instagram is a really easy tool to use for that. So if you can just apply a filter, choose a filter and apply the filter, and then everything will have the same sort of feel as it comes out through your Instagram channel, So
yeah.
Or you can use like sort of slightly more pro equipment, like Lightroom, which you can have on your mobile phone or desktop, although you have to pay for it on the desktop. But again, just when you edit your pictures, make sure they have the same sort of tone and colour about them, the same sort of vibrancy, or sort of vignettes on them, make sure it's consistent. But again, there's some really easy things you can do, just like using Instagram and the filters on Instagram to do that.
Definitely. Yeah, I've seen on Lightroom, which is the app on the mobile, which, as you mentioned, is free. You can buy for just a few pounds, I think, presets of editing so that already looks. And I see people use that quite a lot on Instagram just to get a kind of look and feel, like you're talking about consistency. Or you can make your own,
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can just create your own presets and then just apply that every time in the Lightroom app. So I mean, it's, again, you're going to need a little bit of knowledge on photography, I guess, and on what you're doing to sort of get that really right. But it can be done. It's, the tools are there. But I think, again, it's just sort of, even if you don't do those final things, the editing is just making sure what you're doing is consistent, or similar. And just rules are good. I love a good rule.
Themes, guidelines.
Themes and guidelines, exactly. Yeah. You do need to break them a little bit now and then. But themes and guidelines are really good to help guide you.
For sure. And I know what really helped me was having a brand board where you have all your colours, all your typography, your logos, your patterns, and a few samples of your image style. And I know in the Jewellery Business Bootcamp, which we run in January each year, we guide jewelers through how to create their brand board. And if you just Google brand board, you'll see an example of it. And that really helped me, because I was like, okay, this is what I'm working with. These are the colours, and I think that's not these colours to begin with is out. And like you said, you start off probably more strict, and then you gradually can sort of work out how you can bring in other elements in a way that's still in keeping.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, if you can create yourself a brand board and then just always refer back to it, if you're ever in doubt about what you're doing, then that's a good thing.
Got mine on my wall.
Yeah, you know your rules.
Yeah, they're quite pretty as well. Nice to look at. Okay, so great. So that's the second one. So lack of consistency throughout the brand, which happens to a lot of us. And then the kind of way to fix that is to have these guidelines and to work on them. And I guess it's always a work in progress, isn't it? There's not perfection, but just striving towards this.
Yeah, definitely work in progress. Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'll talk about that later on. Is but it's just kind of start giving things a go. But just try and refine what you're doing, learn from what you're doing. Learn what feels right, and move forward. Don't be afraid to just have a go at stuff as well.
Definitely. So what is the third mistake?
The third mistake I often see is cluttered design or visuals. So again, with design, when it comes to design, less is always more. So always think about sort of editing down and keeping things simple. And so one major thing here is white space is good. We love white space.
We do.
So let things breathe. It's a really important thing to allow the eye to read things properly. And if you have more white space, it often just makes things look great. So just always keep white space in mind. The more, the better. Yeah, because again, there's an art to that. There's an art to design and doing things well. And not all of us can be good at it, of course. So, but white space is a really important factor. Don't feel like you need to have, you need to fill everything with something all of the time.
I think it can be so tempting, can't it, to be like, oh, I want to show everyone all the things that I've made, and I also want to fit in my brand colours and maybe some of my logo. But then when it all comes together, you kind of lose a lot of it. And I know
too much going on.
When we had our website designed by like a big e-commerce agency a few years ago at London Jewellery School, I remember saying, oh, I'd quite like to have this element and that element. And they were saying to me, actually, the simpler you keep this, the better, especially nowadays with website design, because we're all on our phones, a lot of us. They said, just keep white background plain. Like the research shows for an e-commerce website, plain white background, like it's fine to have a few elements, but keeping it really simple. And it makes sense because there is so much going on. We're so oversaturated with information anyway.
Exactly.
That giving some space to breathe.
Give some space to breathe, for sure. I mean, it's like having a messy room. I don't know about anyone else, but I can't think straight when the room is messy. So, imagine that's the same when somebody's, on your website or looking at, some sort of comms that you've created. Just remember kind of less is more, to allow people to focus. And the same goes for photography. Keep propping simple. I often see people trying to put too many little things into their images, but remember, the focus is really on your product or your jewellery. So, you can add interest as simply as using texture, or fabric or marble or wood, so you don't feel like you have to put lots of little elements in all the time. They are needed at times, but just remember, kind of less clutter is a good thing.
Definitely. Stripping it back again.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a theme of the episode, stripping everything back.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, and what is number 4? What is the 4th common error?
Another mistake is often not having a clear brand story or perspective. So I'm pretty sure every designer out there has a unique perspective, but it's not always communicated well enough. And this is really one of the most powerful tools you have, to tell people about your motivations, your passions, reason for being. We want to know, we need it to be communicated. And I think sometimes people just think that what they've designed or the product or the jewelry is enough to sell it, just because it's pretty enough. But I think you need to remember that with branding, when branding's good, it's sort of creating a whole lifestyle around the product. People want to buy into sort of a lifestyle, so we want to know what you're about, whether you've got ethical principles, or it's just, you've got to tell us a bit more about what you do and why you do it, because you're up against so much competition, so we need to know why you're unique, and why you're different. I think it's kind of utilising the about page, making sure that's really well crafted.
Definitely.
And sort of communicating how your product or jewellery will make someone feel. So I often see this can be lacking sometimes. Maybe people are afraid or just don't know how to put it onto paper. It's not, again, it's not easy.
I love this one. This may be my favourite one, because I feel like you're right, that this, especially as handmade businesses or small businesses, there's so much power in our story.
Definitely.
And the reason why we do this, what we care about, our values. And there's this common saying that we like, which is that we buy from people that we know, like, and trust. And I feel like this kind of really speaks to that. It's the idea that even if you have all of the other things, a beautiful logo, beautiful images, everything looks lovely, if there's no kind of meat behind it, if there's no consistency in terms of something I can connect with and engage with, then it kind of just feels like a glossy film.
Yeah.
So I think that this is, like you said, not always easy to pinpoint. And I think it's also something, again, we develop, don't we? You might start by sharing a version of a story, and then it kind of evolves, and now you have a different perspective.
Yeah, it's very hard to do. In fact, recently with Narratorium, I spent some time recrafting my about page, because I just felt like it wasn't saying enough, or maybe it had been a while since I'd done it. So I just spent some time rewriting things, and it took ages, but it's again, I just felt like it was a really important thing to try and communicate better what's unique and different about me, or my business. So it's an important thing to spend time on. And I think always, with, like I was going to say earlier with the logo, when you're doing these things, it's often good to get other people involved. So use family or friends maybe to read stuff, tell and then feedback on what they think as to what you've created, because it's not always easy listening to the feedback, but it can be really helpful, because I think when you're in the thick of it, it's quite hard to figure things out sometimes. So getting others' opinions is really useful. Just be prepared that you might not like it sometimes, but then you need to it's a good thing. Take it on board. Think about it. Take it on board, and just reassess what you've created. See if you can redo it or do it better.
Definitely. And the Jewellers Academy Facebook group is amazing for this, because we often get people sharing, what do you think of these colours for my logo? Or someone actually shared this morning, she had 2 different taglines and she was asking which one. And immediately we were all like, this is the one. We all know this is the one. And I think she just needed, sometimes you just need someone to say what you already know, just to confirm it, especially when you're working on your own. So I think yeah, definitely putting it out there and getting some feedback. Too much feedback can be overwhelming.
Yeah,
but
too much. Yeah, exactly. Too much can be overwhelming, but a little bit of feedback is often really helpful. Yeah.
Definitely. Wonderful. Okay, so we could spend a whole episode on that one, I think, but we'll move on because I know there's lots to get through.
Yeah.
But yes, definitely a clear values is another way I like to think of it. Sometimes
definitely.
when people are struggling, we just say, why don't you just write down things that you care about? You know, brainstorm. The rules of a brainstorm are nothing is wrong. You know, everything is allowed. And put down some words that have meaning to you, and that can sometimes help you start to realize.
Yeah.
Pull out some bits. So what is number 5?
So number 5, I mean, I'm an art director, so I'm a very visual person, but copy is very important. So I often see people neglecting their copy. So my copywriter, yeah, I mean, she's obviously, this is her thing. But yeah, copywriting is so important. So don't forget to invest in this as part of your branding process. Again, we're not all writers, but practice makes perfect. The more you do, the better you get at it.
So this is like your product descriptions, your writing on your website, blogs,
just information,
newsletters.
Product descriptions, about page. You know, so some of it is creative, some of it is creative writing, some of it is more informative. But, you know, just I think if you try to imagine when you're talking to different people, so when the way I talk to my parents is different to the way I talk to my friends as well. So you've got to try and keep your customer in mind and think about how you would talk to them. But I think ultimately, if you're struggling with that, which I think we may talk about in a bit as well, you know, just write from the heart. You know, I think that's probably, you know, if you're really struggling, just the easiest thing to do is just write from the heart. Write as you. But obviously in the right way. Don't use too much slang unless it's relevant, I guess, you know. But
brand voice, brand tone.
Think brand voice, brand tone, yeah. And then also things like spelling and grammar are just so important. My copywriter used to go nuts at this. Rightly so, of course, because it was a job. So, but just remember to always check your spelling and grammar because it is important. Because it can often look a little unprofessional if it's not on point. So yeah, and then, you know, again, if I was, you know, doing a branding project, tone of voice would form part of that project. So again, we would set a tone of voice document with brand guidelines on, you know, how much humour, how much warmth, you know, and the style of language. So again, if you can set yourself some guidelines and then, you know, stick to those rules, that's a good thing to keep consistency, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to have some tips around copywriting. One that someone told me once, which I found really helpful as well. I love what you said about writing from the heart. I think that's really important. I think people can tell as well when it's genuine and when you're trying to put across a point that you care about. But the tip was to imagine it's one person that you're speaking to. Because I think sometimes we try and make it for everyone. And it gets so general that it almost just feels like it's just blown away because it's nothing, there's no consistency or kind of content to it. Whereas if you were writing to one person and you imagine that almost ideal customer and write it to them. I do this with Instagram posts. I picture someone in mind who would be reading it and write it. And I found that to be really helpful. So I guess everyone has different.
Yeah, just imagining one person rather than a whole load. Yeah, it's definitely easier. Yeah, it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, it's one of those tips, like if you're public speaking, imagine everyone naked or whatever. I'm not sure that would actually help me. I feel like that would freak me out. But...
yeah, maybe not naked, but yeah. Just one person.
Imagine the person reading this is naked. That could be a whole different angle.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Okay, so neglecting your copy, yeah. So that's something that you could work on. And if all of this sounds like a lot, these might be little projects to work on throughout the year. You might set aside like, okay, there's, you know, I've got a bit of time in this month when I'm not making things or, you know, and I'm going to really focus in on this. Because I think when we talk about all of this stuff, you know, this takes years to really master it all. So it's just taking what do you need to work on first, start with that, and then kind of gradually move on to the next thing.
Yeah, they're just little things, little sections that you can start to consider, aren't they? Because it's a huge project for anyone.
Yeah.
Like you say, it takes years to master. So just take little bits and focus on it for a while.
For sure. We do what we can.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was neglecting your copy. So what is number 6? Sixth.
Well, actually,
mistake.
It kind of leads quite well into number 6, because number 6 is about a lack of focus on the customer. So again, it's imagining your customer. So, again, it's really important you build a picture of who they are, because once you understand them, it will help you to focus your brand and make sure that you're kind of relevant and interesting to people. So, and again, you can't be everything to everyone all of the time. So you do have to focus down on who's really buying your jewellery.
Yeah. And what would a brand look like that wasn't focused on their customer compared to one that was?
Gosh, I guess you would see it would seem inconsistent. I guess you would see some inconsistencies in all sorts of ways through the content that they're creating or visuals. Yeah. It would just seem very unconnected.
Yes,
I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one example that comes to mind for me is if we're talking about photographing your jewelry on a model, if the model was completely different demographic to who your ideal customer is, that could put them off, thinking, oh, that's for really young people, or that's for a certain type of person that I don't feel I can relate to. So I guess different things like that. And even when you spoke about language, if there's a lot of slang that so people don't understand, that could be a disconnect as well.
Exactly. I think it will come through in all of the ways, all of your branding, through copy and visuals and content. So just remember to keep an idea of who your customer is. I think so if you're struggling with it, you've got a few options. So you could talk to some of your regular customers or your best customers. You might know them. Probably best if you don't know them, I guess. But you can ask them what they love about what you do. It's not so easy, I guess, when you're purely online. But I guess if you're at craft shows or trade shows, you can often spark up a conversation, and you can ask people what is it you like about my jewelry? What is it you've seen that you liked? So because then you can kind of maybe spark up a conversation, get an idea of why they're interested in you, what they love. So and it helps you then perpetuate back to that kind of customer, I guess. Or if you really feel that if you're genuinely designing a product or jewelry that you love and that you would wear or use, then use yourself as the customer profile and think about what your interests are and how you would like to be spoken to, and then use that. So there are a few options if you're struggling, because it's not it's not always easy.
Definitely.
And you may need to sort of flex your comms a little bit as well, because it might be people buying gifts for people. So as well, your comms might change a little bit when you're if you feel like something's a gift that someone might buy, then that might change the way you talk a little bit to that customer, because it's not the person that will wear your jewellery, it's the person that's going to buy your jewellery for someone else to wear. So, but always have your customer in mind, I think, and a focus on the customer.
Definitely. Brilliant. Okay. And what is number 7?
So maybe also people being too polished or rigid with their brand. So some designers and handmade artists or jewelers do or might have a good knowledge of branding and design, and so they can make a great job with that. But sometimes there's almost too many rules, or it's too perfect, and the brand starts to sort of lack a little bit of personality and warmth. Sort of allows them to hide behind things a little bit.
Yes.
So
do you speak from experience?
Maybe. Yeah. So I definitely have felt this at times. With Narratorium, I think I was always sort of reluctant to put myself too much to the forefront. So I kind of hid behind a we and our sort of brand notion and never really showed myself. But I've started to sort of realise that maybe I need to say a bit
come
more.
out of the shell,
and talk
emerge,
emerge, because I think it sort of starts to limit you a little bit. So you kind of in terms of making a connection. So I think it's important to sort of allow yourself to have a bit of fun and play and tell your story and convey a bit of emotion. So, you know, be a little bit personal. Too formal or too polished is, you know, can be maybe just, it's not enough. It's maybe a bit off-putting. You know, we're humans, aren't we? We you know, we need warmth.
we do to connect, and some imperfections, you know. If everything looks too perfect, and I definitely see this with, because quite a lot of people do transition from graphic design or a similar background into jewelry. I've seen there's quite a big percentage of jewelers who have a creative background like that, and I definitely see it with them. Commonly is that they're so professional and it looks so polished and so good that you almost feel like it's not for you, that it's, you know, it's this big brand that is unavailable to you. And I think the great thing about us as small businesses and handmade designers is that we can connect with people and we can be less formal and we can show personality, and people love that. We all love that. We all love to feel connected to what we're buying, and especially if we're making a conscious choice to say, actually, I want to shop small, I want to shop handmade. And Emma has this awesome business and she sells these like brilliant love locks, and they're just so unique and different. You can get them engraved, you know, whatever it is, as opposed to there's this brand that is that anyone can buy from. So I think that's another really important one. Yeah,
definitely. It's just sort of not being too corporate, I think, isn't it? Too corporate and formal, and therefore a little bit cold. Yeah, it's you convey that personality and warmth of yours, definitely. Yeah,
we can do that for sure.
Yeah, exactly. As handmade artists and jewelry designers, definitely. People want to hear more.
For sure. Wonderful. Okay, we're getting through them. And what is number 8?
So number 8, I would say, is packaging misaligned to the brand. So, you know, again, branding runs through everything, through so much of the business. It can go wrong at any point. So I think packaging is maybe sometimes one of those things that can go a little bit wrong or doesn't quite translate the brand values. I find it, especially, you know, if when you're sort of selling sort of high-priced items, maybe slightly luxury, sometimes packaging can feel a little bit cheap or lacking, or just a bit of an afterthought. So, you know, you've got to make sure that your packaging is representing your brand, and it's one of the best bits as well, I think. You know, for someone receiving your product or your jewelry, you know, it's lovely unwrapping things. The unwrapping experience is special, isn't
Christmas
it? Still, you know. So I mean, again, you know, it doesn't have to, you know, cost a fortune, and you can still make it eco-friendly if it's, you know, if that's your kind of stance, you know. Although I think most of us are working towards that anyway, and most of us are aware of that. But, you know, it needs to be a special experience and a nice one. So yeah, you need to think about packaging. And it doesn't have to cost a bomb either, I think, is the important thing. Is you can just invest in a few nice touches. Some professionally printed stickers, for example, maybe they're like embossed or they're on gold foil, or, you know, you've got some specially branded tissue paper even. But just in making sure you're investing in one part of it at least, I guess, so that it has, you know, a good feel about it and it's representing your brand still.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree that the packaging is really important, and how it's communicated, and especially if you're getting something through the post or it's a gift, because obviously if you're buying it for yourself from the designer, then, you know, and they're right in front of you, then packaging isn't always as important. But a lot of the stuff that we sell nowadays is online, and so, you know, when it arrives through the post, and like you said, unraveling it all and seeing how it's been put together is all part of the experience.
Definitely.
So yeah, and for some people this might come later on. I think the journey is often that we start with a plainish kind of box that we might put a sticker on, or because you want to start small, don't you, and not invest too much, but then it's something you can go on a journey with in terms of exploring the different tissue papers, ribbons, stickers, boxes, bags.
And I think that's the thing, is just maybe if you just pick one thing to invest in, you know, whether it's the especially printed boxes or just the stickers, but just one, you know, something you spend a little bit of money on. But yeah, like you say, when you're starting out, you don't want to sort of go too far down that route in case things don't work out, I guess. But yeah, it can be a journey and it can evolve. But just make sure you've thought about it
definitely. Great.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Number 9. What is number 9?
So kind of we talk about setting rules and guidelines, but design is always evolving. So it's pretty hard for most brands to keep up with things. So even for, handmade artists and jewelers who have maybe got some great branding, over a couple of years' time, things, can start to look a little bit tired or dated. So I think it's a good idea basically to try and keep things moving a little bit and make little tweaks or introduce new things, even if that's just through your photography, if you're adding new props or new, just still being a little bit creative as you go along. Remember to keep the brand fresh. So, don't just let things go stale over a long period of time. There will always be a need to sort of, stay relevant and stay current and kind of keep up to date. So yeah, it's one thing I kind of see happening sometimes.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting because we can get stuck. We're so rigid with ourselves trying to stick to this brand board that then we can feel like, oh, I can't introduce anything new. And I think it's really nice to start from that smaller space. It's a little bit what we talk about with our businesses is you niche to begin with, and then you can kind of expand out as you grow.
Exactly.
And it's the same, I guess, with branding. And an example we were talking about with the Jewellers Academy brand is just with our Instagram posts and things. We used to have a very white background, and then, wanted to mix things up a bit. So we added in some kind of watercolor splashes with our brand colors, and that is such a small thing, really. I bought a little watercolor splash thing from Creative Market. Anyone who doesn't know about Creative Market, it's somewhere you can spend a lot of your life. It's like an online platform for buying little brand elements and things. But that we put that across our notes, across our kind of different areas. Not everywhere. It's not on the website so much, but it's just a little update. And I think when we started to share those different Instagram posts, people felt a bit refreshed, like, oh, this is something new, this is something a little bit updated. And I guess next year there might be something a little bit different as well, so in keeping with the theme but a little fresh, as you said.
Yeah, just sort of little updates and little tweaks can just help to keep things fresh, because I think that's always important in design, is keeping things fresh. And so we also talk about it in sort of when we're doing layouts and booklets, for example. When you turn a page, you want it to excite and engage. So I think it's just always important to remember you want to keep trying to do that without straying too much. So again, it's a massive challenge really for people who don't know what they're doing, but just try to keep it in mind. I mean, just so I'm talking over a big space of time though as well. We're talking over a couple of years. Just see what you can do to kind of evolve a little bit and move things forward. And then it kind of hopefully will mean you don't need to do a massive overhaul in another few years' time. So just keep sort of refreshing a little bit. Do little bits now and then to help you, to keep relevant and current. Yeah.
So it's constantly evolving. And it's the same with our jewellery as well, developing our signature style as we tend to evolve it over time. Yeah. So it all makes sense. As the business grows, you expect things to change and evolve and become more of what they were meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if things don't represent you anymore, if your jewellery has changed or your product has changed slightly, then don't be afraid to sort of, again, just change things up a little bit. Don't stick with something just because it's done and it's easy.
Let it go.
Yeah, let it go. Move on. Yeah.
Wonderful. And the 10th mistake, the final mistake.
Okay, so this is sort of branding in the bigger sense, I guess. It's kind of, because once you've got your look and feel, your brand colours and packaging and all these things that kind of visually represent you, it's branding is also about how you behave. So sort of next biggest mistake I often see is sharing irrelevant content. So kind of going forward with marketing and and again your brand's projection, it's I often see people sharing stuff that's just not relevant, or maybe just not even interesting, or maybe just too much information, maybe too personal. So just remember to stick to what you can talk about under your brand lens, and keep your content relevant and focused towards that dream customer. So just being aware of what's within your remit and what's not.
Yeah, it's again about having those guidelines, isn't it? So it's not too broad. And I think it's helpful for you to know what they are, because if you wake up in the morning and think, I've got to share something today, and it could be anything in the whole world, that's a pretty hard decision to make. Whereas if you know, I've got to share something today and it needs to either be some of my work or some behind the scenes or something that my customer would be really interested in, you're already narrowing it down and making it much easier for yourself.
Exactly. And you should sort of have a good idea, I guess. You know what your inspirations are. You know what's behind your work. So you have permission to talk about most of those things, really. Your inspirations, so it could be quite wide-reaching. But just always think, will my customer be interested in this? Is it relevant? And is it aspirational enough as well? It's always got to be aspirational. That's not to say you can't show the odd sort of mistake or, in the studio or something. But, just always try to keep it sort of aspirational and focused on your customers' interests.
It reminds me a little bit of some of the jewellers that I work with more closely, and we kind of go through their Instagrams together. And occasionally we see accounts where you can't tell straight away that they're selling jewellery because there's so many other things going on. And the other things might be really fun and interesting as well. But I always think when you come to your account, and again, I'm always thinking through an Instagram lens, but it could be anything. You immediately, it's obvious what you're selling. So there should be regular posts of your pieces and exactly what you're selling. It's great to share the other stuff as well. You can go the other way where it's just only jewelry and nothing else. And you kind of feel like, oh, is there who makes this and where do they make it? And I want a bit more behind the scenes. But just checking through your feed and saying to yourself, is it obvious that this is what I do and this is what I sell?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. You need to make sure there's not too much other stuff and you've got enough product. And it's always linking back to the product as well in some way, or what you do.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, we've got through all 10. Well done.
I know, that was a long time, wasn't it?
But there's lots. It's such a big topic, isn't it? And there's so much to go through. But hopefully that's given everyone some things to think about. Do come and share with us inside the Facebook group. That's a great place to carry on the conversation. It's just, if you go to Jewellers Academy and find the group on Facebook, you can come and share, which one out of the 10 do you need to work on next? What is your focus going to be? Because we can't do it all at once, but they're all things that we're working on. And I'm thinking as we're going through, there's a few of those I could look at too. So
me too.
Yes. It's a work in progress. So thank you so much, Emma, for coming and sharing your knowledge and experience with us all today. And where can we find you online if people would like to connect with you?
Narratorium really is my jewellery business. So www.narratorium.co.uk is my website address. So come and find me. I'm on Instagram, all the usual channels.
Brilliant. Well, we'll make sure we put the link in the show notes as well, so that you guys can go and make friends with Emma. She's lovely and obviously has a wealth of knowledge. So it's very inspiring to have a look at her, how she does it as well, and communicating it all through this platform of selling jewelry or selling handmade work. So thank you guys so much for listening today, and another big thank you to Emma, and we'll see you on another session very soon.